So, I've been kind of having a bit of a themed week this week, and I wanted to um, share this and discuss um, and kind of spend a few weeks focusing on this topic. Um, we're going to talk about rumination today. So you might be asking yourself, why? Why rumination? Well, I'm reading reading and also kind of listening to podcasts and on ADHD and kind of parenting. How do you parent kids with ADHD? And one of the things that was interesting is this article that I was, or it wasn't an article, it was a podcast. The authors, I guess I'm so used to talking about articles and writers, but the podcasters, the people that did it, they were actually saying in many ways that for kids with ADHD that talk therapy could actually not be very helpful. And I was like, what is that about? Why would that be the case? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. The prefrontal cortex, one, isn't online for most kids, but for kids with ADHD, it's even harder. The ability for to think about your day, learn from it, and project that to the future, it doesn't exist. It's about the here and now. It's a very interesting thing. It's actually a problem of being totally here right now. Yeah. And I have ADHD as well, so I didn't realize this when I was little. So it's not like, if this is the case for you, you're not alone with this. There's many of us that experience this. And, the thing, though, that they talk about, and it just got me thinking, is that they also think, okay, so why isn't talk therapy for kids with ADHD specifically is helpful? And they're actually saying one thing that actually moderates. So a moderator is something that when is kind of present in something, it either makes something go up or down depending on how much of that thing you have. So let me back up and say what moderates most people, but we'll say kids with ADHD especially, having depression or anxiety, and the level of depression and anxiety is actually the amount of rumination that's happening. Yeah, the crux, the thing that makes it worse, so to speak, is rumination. And they're saying, okay, so if we're talking about feelings and we're kind of sticking on these things from the week, are we increasing rumination? Are we just ruminating out loud and then not doing anything? And so for kids specifically that don't have that ability to kind of think about the past, plan for the future, so forth, the pattern of rumination starts to develop. Now, these authors were a little black and white, and if you know me, I'm not about black and white thinking, all or nothing. I think that is what we call a cognitive distortion. It can't be true if it's black and white. They say they're very black and white about how they see therapy for kids specifically with ADHD. I don't know if they're but I am still for it because there's a lot of other things that therapy is helpful for, like some of the behaviors that are associated with it, like some of the kind of oppositional behaviors, emotion regulation issues, things like that. But their point being, at least with kids, we need to go out and do stuff, less talking. And then I was like, that's an interesting concept. And so I've just been playing with that and wondering, we don't talk about this much, about the idea of rumination, but sometimes we kind of develop ways in which we see a rumination as a productive way to cope with things. Yeah, that this will work, and we've talked about this actually in different contexts before. Not rumination specifically, but the idea that when something has worked once, we pair it with this will work again, and then we do the thing to feel that good thing. When that doesn't come, it feels hollow, yeah, and we end up feeling worse. We've talked about that in terms of social media use and doom scrolling, yeah. Now I'm saying that's also rumination, yeah. It doesn't yield the results, but for the one time it does, or maybe the once out of like hours and hours of rumination, there's an aha moment, but what's the cost of that? Yeah. A lot of times the cost is not being able to sleep, waking up, feeling restless, throughout the day not being able to be present. And then, we know that it increases anxiety, depression, PTSD, and so forth. So actually, rumination makes things worse. So, why did I bring up all this stuff about ADHD? It's just to say the context of where I'm pulling this from and why I thought it was helpful is I don't want to be caught in that increasing rumination. Yeah. So that's why, and I'm not saying that that's what happens in adult therapy, because that's not what the research supports. So I'm not saying that at all. Can we be in a ruminative process if we're not open to intervention, let's say in the therapy context? Yes. So let's say you're coming to me and I'm like, hey, I think it might be time we do EMDR or parts work or whatever. If it's like, no, or I don't want to, that's fine. We work with that. But is the reason because, you want to keep saying the things you're thinking about over and over during the week out loud, which is fine, but then we're ruminating. Yeah. So that's why we do need to at some point shift. And it's not saying that's a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. I want to hear those things. I want to hear what is it that's been going on. And now, how do we add to it? How do we then make that shift? Yeah. Now, that is different than I hold all these things in, I bottle them in, and I'm going to therapy to release them. That is different. Yeah, categorically different. So if you're struggling with expression, emotional expression, and what you're doing in therapy is releasing that, great. Yeah. If you just notice it's the same pattern, I'm doing this with other people. I'm doing, okay, I'm thinking about this all day. I do the same thing with my therapist. This might be rumination. So, why do we ruminate? Yeah. One, we think it's effective, but two, there's actually there's important reasons for this. One is sometimes the desire, and most often, to fix ourselves. Yeah. If it's not directly ourselves, so if I'm not like, I need to fix me, sometimes it's actually to try to fix our emotions. So, in other words, if I'm feeling fear, let's say I'm out and about and all of a sudden I start, I'm around other people, I'm starting to feel some fear, I might go to my mind to start to make sense of it. I shouldn't feel fear. Why am I feeling fear? There's something wrong with me that I'm feeling this way. And then we just start going down a rabbit hole. People are like, what's going on? And we get stuck, right? Because we're in this really kind of process of trying to fix, of trying to solve, of trying to make ourselves different. Now, it's not just with us. This can also happen with others, where we might perceive something is wrong with them and we need to fix it, or the world. A common one is to focus on politics, which, not that we shouldn't be, but sometimes we overly do that to not deal with, I'm hurting, I feel powerless, I feel fear, I feel sadness, whatever it is that I feel. So here's the thing. The head, cannot solve this, the heart. It just can't. In fact, some people argue not only is it going towards emotions and feeling emotions and being with them that is healing for emotions, but also to do the same when we're kind of fixated and obsessed and kind of having a more of a mental kind of distress. Okay? Another way to say this is we avoid emotion by going into our thoughts. Yeah. Especially people who are used to using their brains for a living. me, some of you, right? Like that, like probably almost everybody here, like where we're, having to think and do and whatever, we're used to solving problems. Yeah. And that's not saying that, let's say you're doing construction, that's what your work is, you still have to solve problems, right? But a lot of times, even like if you're doing construction, you might be used to solving it with your hands, so it might be a little more body based. But if you're solely like me, where it's like I got to think through this, and we then use our intelligence to try to outsmart our feelings. This is rumination. Yeah? It doesn't actually work. It just feels like it works. For the one time it does, and it made you feel better, we can't keep doing it. So we get addicted to it. So there are very little things that I will say, do not do this, because we will. Do not ruminate. Now you might say, yeah, easier said than done. It is. I'm being a little, I don't know what the word, I don't want to say trite, but what's another way to say it? Kind of simplistic about that. It's a very hard process to disengage. So really what I'm trying to get at in a very straightforward way is to say, we really need to disengage rumination. Yeah? It is the opposite of well-being. Rumination feels like stuck in your head. We second guess ourselves. We feel bad about ourselves. There's nothing good that comes from rumination. If you are saying but in your mind, that's okay. It just means part of you uses that as a way to cope and is not ready to make that shift. So just maybe open yourself to the possibility that it may not be as effective. And then just look at when you do it and say, is this helpful? When I was in grad school, I didn't know what the concept of rumination was. So I just thought, hey, you just think things through all the time. You just think. So if I got anxious, like, what is this, weird bump on my shoulder? I'd Google it, because that's what you do. You think. And I see some of you smiling, because what happens when you Google, it's cancer? Okay, then what happens? You get scared. Now you start to research and do, and I was doing research. I was doing a dissertation, and I know how to do the research, so I start researching it all, trying to solve it without addressing the emotion. Yeah, without addressing, hey, I have some fear that there's a bump here. That may just literally be nothing. It might be a vein I've never noticed before, and for whatever reason, I have. It could also be something severe, but we have this negativity bias where we go right into the worst case scenario. Yeah, and that's what the rumination does. So I don't expect after we have this discussion to just say, okay, we're totally, you're going to be able to disengage it, because that's not how it works. Rumination is about skillfully disentangling from it. Because the minute we say don't ruminate, we ruminate, right? So that's why I was kind of kidding when I said don't do this, because it's like, yeah, well, good luck. What we can do, though, is keep guiding just like we do with our attention, because that's really what it is. It's where we're placing our focus. Actually, so before I say how to do it, let's talk about that process. So rumination often happens when we, somebody said, we're ruminating about ruminating. Exactly, yeah, and we don't need to do that. It's like, don't judge your judging. It's like, just notice it. So labeling it is a good thing. But what tends to happen is we get a thought, we get a thought in our mind, or a story. Usually it's a story, to be honest, some derivative of a story we've, as we're meditating, we're starting to get really used to. I struggle with these 5, 10, 15 stories, whatever those are. Usually some derivative of that gets kind of triggered in some way by our environment, whether it's a belief I'm not safe, or a belief something's wrong with me, or I'm not good enough, or whatever it might be, something kind of gets triggered, a lot of times we're feeling anxiety, shame, sadness, depression, nothingness, whatever it might be. We're trying to fix it. So we engage in that process and go, okay, so how do I fix it? And what do I do next? And then I should do this. And then what did that person say? And dot, 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 dot. And we start going in all these circles, and it just becomes a cyclical process that nothing ever gets solved. Yeah. So in other words, and as we're doing that, oftentimes we're getting tense and tight and not even realizing it. And the outcome usually is feeling more anxious, panicky, depressed, nothingness, just feeling flat. Sometimes it's body. You might have a headache, a migraine from it, right? Because we get so tense doing it. So this is where mindfulness can help. So when we're so used to that, we're kind of training ourselves almost into this rumination, or we've been trained into it. So we kind of got to train ourselves out of it. So instead of, the first thing is to kind of acknowledge and accept rumination is not helpful. If we can accept that, and again, if you're like, I'm not there yet, then just acknowledge that for yourself. It's okay to not be there yet. You might say, nope, it works for me, and that's fine. Because it might just be that a part of you is not ready to release that because the alternative might be too scary. Like I've had some people say, yeah, but if I do that, I have to actually feel my emotion, and I don't want to feel my emotion. And no matter how much I say that would be helpful, they're not ready. So just know that. Like, you might not be ready. That's okay. If you are, the first thing is, let's just say, this is something we need to disengage from all the time. Yeah? I don't need to keep training myself, so I need to train myself out of it. So when a thought comes in, we identify it and notice, okay, I'm starting to think about, the story, whatever it is. You can diffuse from it, you can label it. We're going to practice some of those things in the next few weeks of how to kind of shift from that. So I'm just giving you an overview, but some way of acknowledging it, and then we're doing what we do with mindfulness. We're turning over and over and over to the present moment, using internal, so it could be breath, it could be some sort of sensation, or external objects to help us come back to the present moment. So oftentimes we sit down to, let's say, watch a TV or movie at night, and we can't sit still. We're thinking about this and that, and an elaborative process would go, okay, I'm watching this. I don't know if any of you are Stranger Things fans, but I am, and so I just finished watching the final season, and I notice from first watching it, if I've had a busy day, it's so different than if I haven't, or if I'm thinking about something, it's different. So you're watching it and you're kind of focused, and then your mind starts to drift, right? You can just bring it back. However, we get when we're ruminating about something, it's there, and we want to then fix it and solve it and make it different. So we keep going to that thing, and sooner or later we might just say to ourselves or other, screw this. I'm just going to go work. Because a lot of times it's about work, or I'm just going to go, try to solve this. So now you're not watching the TV show you want to watch. You're now training yourself that when I'm thinking about something else while I'm watching TV, then I'm just going to go jump at the whim of my mind. Yeah. So you're actually teaching the mind that rumination is getting it what it wants. So if you look at it like that, instead, can we go, okay, notice rumination. I'm going to keep coming back to the show over and 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 over. And you keep doing it just like we do with awareness of breath practices. Yeah. Keep coming back. Yeah. We're not fighting. This is very important. We're escorting the attention. Yeah. There's a difference. Yanking yourself is different than coming back. All right. Notice that? Coming back. Okay? And at first, if you're somebody that does this a lot, really caught up in thoughts, that process is really tough. Like I remember after my dissertation, when all I was thinking about was that thing and getting past it, I couldn't watch TV. I thought my mind I don't believe minds break, but I was like, nope, but mine did. Because I couldn't sit still. I couldn't focus. And what it was is I needed to retrain my mind back into it. And so some of this is having some compassion, grace, giving yourself a little space. That if you're like, all right, I do this all the time, just start to kind of help. And it might be 1,000 times in an hour. Just let yourself know it will get easier. Yeah, because you're retraining your mind. Yeah, really back to being present. Okay. So, with all this said, the meditation we're going to do today is going to be actually, we don't want to villainize this part, yeah, because part of us is ruminating for a reason. It's not a bad thing. It's coming out of a really good intention to help, to solve, to fix, to make things better. So today we're going to work on just trying to understand what this part's doing for us. Maybe just be aware of it, yeah, and kind of practice that. And then in the next few weeks, we'll kind of build on that and kind of how do we disrupt it, disentangle, work on some other patterns through that. Okay. So feel free to get into a mindful posture, whatever that is for you today. Again, just checking in with your body. If you'd rather be lying down and that feels like something you want to give to yourself, then letting yourself get into that position. Or if it feels more maybe important to stay seated, maybe for me sometimes the seated posture can represent this kind of intention I want to kind of put out there. So just checking in. What is it that you want? And just starting by taking a few deep breaths in and out. Using these intentionally deep breaths to really anchor in and ground yourself in the present moment. Really nothing, at least internally, is workable without being present first. Just noticing what's present in the body. Is the body tired or filled with energy? Maybe it's relaxed or tense. Just making note, acknowledging this. Noticing what's happening in the mind. Is the mind filled with thoughts? Mostly empty of thoughts? Maybe thoughts are moving slowly or quickly. Now connecting with an anchor. This can be the breath, sound, maybe movement is part of your practice today, an external object, perhaps. And just spend some time anchoring into this present moment. If you notice that there's maybe something the mind keeps going towards, maybe something that feels, or an awareness that you've been maybe ruminating on this topic, thinking over and over about something without resolution. Sometimes can be feeling fixated on a sensation or emotion in the body, thoughts that we're having, sometimes even feeling maybe like we can call it like obsessing about something, stressing about something. If that's already present for you, I just want you to, if you feel open to it today, to begin to open up to this. Use this for the remainder of the practice. But if that's not the case for you, if there's nothing really kind of you're feeling stuck on, feeling like you're ruminating or fixated on, you know what, it kind of, see if you can invite that in a little bit. You might have to kind of think a little bit about the last time maybe you were stuck on something, what that was, and kind of think through the part at which you notice, yeah, I keep thinking about this over and over and over. And it's okay, and maybe even preferable to have a little distance from this, so if it feels overwhelming, then just let go of the practice, the kind of instruction, and just keep going into anchoring, grounding today. If it feels more like in the past, something that kind of maybe something that was bothering you this past week, no longer is, then maybe letting yourself be curious about this, kind of, as long as you can kind of sense into this, so we can learn from it a bit. That's really the point here. Try not to pick something that's too big that would feel overwhelming, something that feels kind of manageable, or maybe something that, again, just kind of feels present all the time. Like sometimes we kind of hyper-focus on chronic pain, or maybe it's a body part that we don't like, or thought that we have over and over, an emotion like anxiety, panic, fear, depression. See if you can kind of bring this to the forefront. Kind of this pattern. And whether it's present right now, or maybe you're reflecting back on a time it was, I want you to see if you can kind of take one more step back. Maybe almost imagine observing yourself, like as if you're seeing yourself through a TV or a camera or something like that. Seeing yourself ruminate. Almost imagine that you can kind of have like this x-ray vision and kind of mind read for yourself, so you can actually see and hear everything that's going on. How the mind keeps stirring stuff up, and perhaps how there's a part of you that keeps engaging it too. And just see if you can notice what it feels like in the body when this happens. Maybe just noting, is it pleasant, unpleasant, neutral? Maybe noticing the kind of sort of quality of thought when this happens. Is it kind of a more well thought out process? Chaotic? Neutral? A mixture? Does it seem linear? In other words, kind of going from A to Z, or 1 to 10, or maybe more circular, like A to Z, back to A to Z, or A to F and back to A, and so forth, or 1 to 10, 10 to 1, back to 8, 7, 5, 1, 10. Again, we're just noticing this. See if you can be curious about this. Now the next part you may want to take some time with and really let yourself meditate on for a few minutes. Meditating on this question. If you weren't ruminating, or sometimes again we call it obsessing or fixated or stressing, what would you be feeling? Maybe feeling towards yourself, other people, the world. I'll repeat that again. If you weren't in your thoughts, what would be happening in your body? What would you be noticing? Another way to say this is, if I weren't thinking so much, what would I be feeling? Or, what do I not want to feel in this moment that maybe I'm running from, trying to fix, get rid of, make different?
Sometimes the answers to these questions, what would I be feeling, might be obvious for you. Might be feeling anxious, fearful, panicky, distressed, pain. Would feel intolerable. Other times it might be a bit more nuanced, less clear. See if you can stay open to this, curious. For example, one that sometimes is less clear is if I wasn't doing this, I don't know what I'd be feeling. Perhaps even feeling bored. Boredom can be another thing that is hard to sit with. So we focus and fixate. What can also be less clear is when we have a strong emotion towards someone we care about. And so feeling that feels intolerable. So again, we go to our mind to fix it, to solve it. And oftentimes this ends up being some derivative of how am I the problem? Even when you're feeling something directly related to somebody's behavior. Maybe they're being annoying or frustrating. Maybe they're saying something that's rude or crossing a boundary. So if as you're doing this, you can kind of identify, acknowledge what this ruminative part is trying to help you with. See if you can muster up some gratitude for this part. Trying to help, trying to solve and fix, and maybe help you feel less distressed, even if the outcomes aren't very helpful. That feels too hard, distant, or if there's really nothing you can kind of identify as a way it's trying to help. Let's see if you can just remain curious about that. Maybe something to continue to explore. Now letting go of the content of whatever it is you've been focusing on. Just spend a few moments connecting back with an anchor, the present moment. In this way, we can kind of sandwich the meditation with a focus on anchoring and grounding. And oftentimes this serves to help all the parts within us see that we always attempt to come back to safety. And back to the present. This can often help with the ability to be explorative, inquisitive, curious. Now, gently ending today's practice by opening the eyes if they're closed, moving the body in any way that would suit you best in this moment, maybe honoring the practice however you'd like.